This is the PowerPoint for Unit 5, covering Chapters 8 and 9 in our textbook. The first part of the PowerPoint is going to be focusing on intercollegiate sport management. This is going to include anything from two-year institutions at the junior college level to Division 1, 2, and 3 institutions within the NCAA. The second point of the PowerPoint is going to be exploring Chapters 9, which is going to focus a bit more on professional sport management. So as we move from the focus of interscholastic sport to intercollegiate sport, some of the biggest differences are going to be the way that our society embraces the two. For example, in interscholastic sport, we learned that the participants, coaches, athletic teams were much greater in terms of the scope and size of that group of people who participate in sport at that level. And yet intercollegiate sport, even though it's smaller in scale in terms of numbers of participants, coaches, and programs to interscholastic sport, it is much more massive in terms of how our sport culture in the U.S. here embraces it and kind of holds it in a higher regard. So, for example, if you think about current media, whether it's on TV, whether it's in pop magazines, pop culture, social media, celebrities, government officials, politicians, there is a high focus put on their alma maters or the schools that they champion and embrace in terms of when their preferred team is competing, whether it's in the NCAA tournament for men's basketball or it's the end of the year playoffs for football. So there's definitely a higher regard, I think, to intercollegiate sport and a higher place of emphasis that's put on in terms of our sport culture and how we embrace it. Money is also another huge differentiator in terms of the impact that financial emphasis is placed on the two. So, for example, in 2010, there was a $10.8 billion agreement between the NCAA and CBS and Turner Broadcasting for the rights to show the NCAA men's basketball tournament. I know specifically at Notre Dame, we for years have had a huge financial contract with NBC. So all of the home football games for Notre Dame for years now have been shown on NBC. And also just, again, there's a 12-year deal that our textbook talks about where college football playoffs are shown on ESPN for a $7 billion contract. So just the financial impact is massive when we talk about the difference between obviously interscholastic and intercollegiate sport. I did want to share with you just something that I found interesting. Our text shares a bit about this, but just the origins of intercollegiate sport. I had remembered reading something a long time ago about how American football had started between Harvard and Yale and the competition that was held years and years ago. But actually, when you think about how intercollegiate sport began, it was based on an event held in 1852 between Harvard and Yale, and it was what they called to test the superiority of the oarsmen. So it was a rowing competition. It was what we would call crew in today's kind of language. And so just a really interesting way that these two schools decided to have an athletic competition against each other in 1852, which ended up being, just a highly attended event. President Roosevelt, as he was going through hosting White House conferences on athletics and on football, 50 years later, around the early 1900s, what he decided in terms of even as the president of the U.S. is that we needed to find a way to have an agreed upon governance as we're looking at these institutions, these academic houses as they're competing against one another. And a part of the reason of doing that is because it started to become pretty intense in terms of these schools when they would compete against each other. If you have no rules and regulations and there's a high level of intensity in it, they even just were finding that they had to have some kind of structure and rules that were established. And so in 1905, President Roosevelt hosted a conference on collegiate football and just tried to figure out ways in which they can start to provide these rules, regulations, and norms. And at that point, they called that conference, they called that committee kind of gathering forming the first intercollegiate athletic association, which in the United States. So that used to be called the IAAUS. And so it was officially constituted in 1906. And in 1910, the name was changed to the NCAA. So the National Collegiate Athletic Association, which is what we know it as today. Now, in the NCAA, we'll talk a little bit more about this as we look at recruiting and even national letters of intent, eligibility issues. The NCAA is going to be divided into three competitive divisions. Many of you are familiar with this, Division 1, 2, and 3. I did give a link to you here. If you click on the NCAA acronym up on the top right hand side of this PowerPoint, it'll take you directly to the NCAA website where you can be able to search a bit more about those three institutions. And there, we could spend 3 classes, I think, in just exploring the website itself and all the multiple facets that are held within the NCAA. It is a massive, massive organization that is held to become the largest and most influential college sport governing body in the U.S. So I think they have the most current stats there. Our text will talk about, 1,287 college and universities participate. Again, go ahead and look on the website and you'll see the most current numbers. Our textbook, again, is about 3 years behind what current stats we have for the NCAA. Secondly, one of the things that I thought was really interesting is that within those institutions and within those divisions of Divisions 1, 2, and 3, Division 3 is actually the largest, and it comprises 40% of NCAA membership. And that was new information to me. I did not realize that the Division 3 is actually the largest level. Another piece that I want to share with you are the following associations that you'll see there on the right-hand side. Some of you may be familiar with the NAIA. Years after I played collegiate softball, I coached at a very small school in Mobile, Alabama, and that was part of the NAIA conference. Their recruiting standards are a bit different. Eligibility is a bit different, and there's going to be some pretty significant distinctions between the NCAA and the NAIA. Now, in recent years, a lot of small private faith-based institutions like Azusa Pacific, Point Loma University, Biola University have transitioned and made the jump from the NAIA to the NCAA. So that's going to be really interesting as we hear from Dr. Bethany Moore at Biola University. She's the athletic department, the director of athletics there, and how she was kind of what her journey was like as they moved from the NAIA to the NCAA. So that's going to be an important distinction to know in terms of as teams move from one association to the other, it's going to impact the way that their coaches approach recruiting, compliance, and eligibility. The last few pieces there I wanted to just point out to you, if you can click on and the hyperlink to any of those, I think that's going to be really interesting. Those are going to be all, other than the NCCAA, that's another small organization that I was not as familiar with prior to teaching this class. That's actually the National Christian College Athletic Association. Now, it's not a separate division. There are going to be schools that participate in both the NAIA and the NCAA that are still part of that athletic association. It's not a standalone competitive entity. It's actually an association that includes institutions from both the NCAA and NAIA within that unique perspective of Christian Collegiate Athletic Association participation. The 4 links there below that are going to include the 4 specific membership options for 2-year institutions. And so those are as follows. The first, and again, these each have hyperlinks. The first is the American Indian Higher Education Consortium Athletic Commission. 36 schools are represented. 1,000 athletes are part of that institution or part of that organization. Next, you'll see the National Junior Collegiate Athletic Association, the NJCAA. 525 schools participate, approximately 60,000 athletes in that category. And now here in California, we would automatically think that we are part of this. If you're part of a Southern California junior college athlete, you would assume, well, you're just part of the NJCAA. But actually what we have here in California is we have a separate California Community College Athletic Association with its own standalone association, its own website, and it's pretty distinct to California, obviously. There's 107 schools represented, about 27,000 athletes, so it's almost half the size in terms of athletes that participate, but a smaller fraction of schools. Lastly, then, you have the NWAACC, which is the Northwest Athletic Association of Community Colleges. So 35 schools are in that category. A smaller percent of athletes. There's a little bit less than 4,000 athletes that are part of that organization. So please take some time to explore each of those different websites if you have time. And just as we start to move into governance, it will make a bit more sense as we talk about these different levels and how the rules and regulations are impacted by these overarching government bodies. So one of the major concerns within collegiate sport governance and within being an athletic director or sport manager at the intercollegiate level are going to be issues within college sport finance. The Equity in Athletics Disclosure Act, the EADA, I provided a hyperlink there that will take you directly to the EADA website. It exists to help ensure that institutions are in compliance with Title IX of the Educational Amendments Act, which basically means any institution receiving federal financial aid needs to submit a report documenting expenditures for each fiscal year. And so one of the ways in which institutions do that is they provide data for this EADA report every year. And so if you were to look on the website here and link to it directly from this PowerPoint slide, it'll take you right to the EADA website. And one of the resources that you're going to have is you're going to be able to search for information from one particular school, or you can even look to compare within the school itself what the finances are in terms of how they distribute funding for men's and women's sports, men's and women's coaching salaries, and so forth. But what I found interesting is you can actually do a comparison with up to 4 schools. So I just put in a generic search for institutions within the state of California, and I was primarily interested in looking at this comparison between a private and public institution. So I was looking at USC and UCLA. And what's really interesting here is that once you see this report, one note to consider is that it's about 2 years. The data exists from 2 years prior to the date that you're searching. So if we're in 2017, the most recent data that's going to be disclosed to you is going to be about 2015 report. Same thing if it's 2018, you're going to see the report from 2016. And so as I pulled up the information, I thought it was really, really interesting in terms of what is disclosed to you. The report will show you the total enrollment at each institution, as well as the overall number of participants within each men's and women's sport team. So again, you can look within the institution itself to see how many men's teams are participating, how many women's teams are participating at each institution. You can also see the total number of participants, both male and female. But a step further is even as you're looking at the comparison within the institution, you can compare it to another. So for example, in 2015, the total men's teams participants at USC was 316 men's team total participants, and they had about 306 women's participants. And that was fairly close to that of UCLA, 365 men athletes who are participating at UCLA. And then you have a bump there of 423 women's participants within the institution. It'll also share with you and disclose coaching staff and salaries, which I found really interesting as well. You can find the average institutional salary per head coaching position at each institution that you choose to explore. And I'm going to scroll down here a bit. You can actually save this document as a PDF. You can just access it online, whatever's most convenient to you. But as I scroll down, it'll actually show you even the revenues and expenses. So it will disclose to you the dollar amount to the dollar actually of what is spent to facilitate and produce the men's teams and also that of the women's teams. It will also share with you recruiting expenses, which I found probably that was the biggest source of discrepancy, is how the men's and women's teams the funding is provided to them for recruiting. So go ahead and explore that a little bit. So for example, I'll just share it with you here. When you look at USC in terms of how the recruiting expenses are shared, At USC, about $1.2 million is spent on recruiting for men's teams, and for women's teams, it's only $350,000. So I found that quite significant. About 3 times as much funding is put towards recruiting for men's teams, and that was a huge difference within the university itself, but also as you're looking at the comparison between USC and then UCLA, about $780,000 at UCLA is distributed to men's teams recruiting, and then a little bit more than half is put towards women's teams. So they're at about $420,000. So a much bigger gap in recruiting expenses between men's and women's teams at USC. But again, even just looking school to school, it's not as big of a discrepancy in terms of what they spend. The biggest jump is going to be what funds are allocated for women team recruiting and then for men's. It'll also share with you operating expenses, which again, just to have this disclosed to us is pretty phenomenal that we can access that to the dollar. We can see what is being spent on each sport team in terms of their operating expenses. And I'm going to look down here, and that should probably finish about what's disclosed to us. And then total funding spent in general at each school, and then what the revenue is. So that's probably the most, again, one of the most significant things that you'll find on this report. So if we're again looking at USC as our model here, the total expenses for athletics at USC is a little bit over $26 million, and the revenue is over $44 million. The total expenses spent at UCLA for athletics is $39 million, and their revenue is $32. So that's kind of interesting as well. For the year 2015, the expenses at UCLA were about $7 million more than what they gained in revenue. And then again, at USC, they almost doubled in terms of what the expenses were and what they had in terms of revenue. And so many factors are going to fall into that in terms of playoffs and media contracts and so forth. But I thought this was an interesting resource for you. So I would really like to encourage you to go ahead and explore that a bit, whether you want to look at your alma mater, the institution you played for, coached at, or just were a student on that campus. I think it'd be really interesting to go through and explore this EADA website and just kind of gain some knowledge and gain some information in terms of how easy it is to access the funding and the disclosure of funds that are provided at that level. So one of the things that I want to highlight for you is the careers in intercollegiate athletic administration. Now this PowerPoint slide is going to directly tie to your forum requirement for Unit 5. And if you recall in the previous unit when we talked about interscholastic athletic administration, the text mentioned 3 different categories of managers: top-level managers, middle-level managers, and supervisory level managers. Now you can take this same model and apply it to intercollegiate athletics and intercollegiate sport administration. Our text will highlight those 3 categories again in terms of the primary role as the athletic director of athletics, or the AD. You might hear that acronym as well. Secondary to that, what you would consider sort of a mid-management level is going to be your associate or assistant athletic directors. Now, each institution may have one director of athletics and multiple associate athletic directors of athletics. If you recall back at the PowerPoint I provided to you with the internal organizational chart at the University of Notre Dame, I think they have 5 or 6 different associate athletic directors, all falling under one primary AD at the university. So you will see a number of associate or assistant positions who are each in charge of various components of the organization under the head AD position. Now the third level, the supervisory level, you're going to find what the text is going to give you about 10 different positions or job opportunities within the managerial level in terms of a supervisory role. Now that's going to include anyone from academic coordinators to the compliance officers, those who are working with ticketing, sports information directors, and so forth, facility management, equipment manager, and so forth. So what the requirement and the hope is for you in the forum discussion is for you to explore a bit positions. We're going to choose one of these 10 categories here under the management level that you see, the supervisory level. Choose one of those 10 potential career opportunity positions. And I want you to find within the NCAA and then within the junior collegiate level a current live real-time job opening in that particular field. So I'm giving you a shortcut here. You can go ahead and explore that on the NCAA website. They actually have what's called the Market, Careers in College Athletics. So if you hyperlink here, it'll take you directly to the site, and you'll have a number of current job openings that you can browse through, and then you can actually, I believe you can actually use an advanced search and find the specific job in one of these supervisorial level positions that you choose to explore. And then you're going to do the same at the community college job level. Now, there's a few different ways of doing that. I just gave you a link here for an overarching website that's going to have community college job opportunities, and then it's going to directly link you to the search criteria for athletics and coaching jobs. You can also look at the different organizations that we provided before. So the California Community College Registry, you can look at the North Atlantic College Community College organization, and so whatever search you would like to choose to find the potential jobs in the community college level, that might be a little diverse in terms of how you go about finding those open positions. But the direct link for the NCAA positions is going to be here for you in the context of what they're calling the market, and that's the direct link to all the positions that are open in the NCAA. So take a moment to look through this information, and again, this is going to be your shortcut to being able to address the question in the forum prompt that's going to be exploring the careers in intercollegiate athletic administration. So I hope this is helpful. So here's a couple resources that I wanted to give you that are highlighted in our text, but are not necessarily possibly even named specifically or given website URLs or links for you to follow in our textbook. This is going to be unique information specifically to this PowerPoint that I wanted to make sure I provided for you. The first aspect is the Eligibility Center. Now, when I was a high school athlete looking to get a scholarship and play collegiate sport, I had to go through what was called the NCAA clearinghouse. That language and that word may be more familiar to you than the Eligibility Center. But what we used to know as the NCAA clearinghouse is basically the front door that student athletes need to go through prior to getting their scholarships, signing letters of intent, or playing collegiate athletics. Eligibility Center is the organization within the NCAA that determines academic eligibility and amateur status. Now, one thing I did not include in this PowerPoint slide is there is a link to a document that does give some more detailed and descriptive information about how to obtain amateur status and what the qualifications are that one needs to meet in order to keep amateur status. So you can find that through many of these links here, but I did not include that document specifically, but that is one that I would like for you to be aware of. What I did provide for you is, again, just speaking about the NCAA Clearinghouse. It used to be called that. Now it is actually called the Eligibility Center, which I think makes sense. It's an easy, accessible website, and you are going to have so many resources within the link here, the hyperlink for the Eligibility Center, that I would really like for you to explore. Another piece is going to be within the Eligibility Center, you'll actually find this document. It's the 2018 Division I Academic Requirements. This link here on the PowerPoint slide will take you directly to that document, but if you explore through the Eligibility Center itself, you'll find this document as well as a document about Division II academic requirements. And so the predominant one being Division I wanted to make sure that one was readily accessible to you. So that's the one that you'll see here in terms of the hyperlink. The last four pieces I wanted to share with you was NCAA. If you click on the link here where it talks about, or it has the verbiage here of want to transfer, click on that and that will directly take you to a location within the NCAA resource site that is going to provide for you two PDF documents. One is going to be a 2-year transfer guide. So if you have a junior collegiate athlete who is wanting to transfer from one school to the next, and how that's going to impact their eligibility, you can find that document there. as well as a little bit more in-depth four-year transfer guide. So in layman's terms, if you were a student athlete at Florida State and you wanted to transfer to University of Michigan, what does that process entail? How do you qualify to transfer? Do you lose eligibility? Do you keep your eligibility? Do you have to sit out a year? All of the logistics that go into those decisions, you'll find in the qualifications here under those two transfer guides. So specifically the 2-year transfer for the junior college level, and the 4-year transfer is going to be anything Division 1, 2, or 3. Last couple pieces here, the NCAA, if you click on the link here for online platform, this was really interesting. I had no idea that this existed prior to preparing for this class and this particular unit. But the NCAA now offers, I believe it's called IGrad, and it's in the same format that you would see the word iPhone, lowercase I, capital G-R-A-D. And it's an online platform that the NCAA now uses and provides to all the student athletes within the NCAA. It's a free resource to them. I don't think that we as non-student athletes can actually obtain access. I know I was looking to try to gain access. I think you can peruse the information as a guest, but in order to actually take part in it and be able to navigate the system internally, you do have to be an NCAA student athlete. But it's an online platform that actually has, it's a video-based interactive model, and it really is aimed to helping student athletes with money management. So everything from how to pay off student loans if they have some, budgeting for laundry and food and miscellaneous, as well as some tools and equipment for them to help prepare them outside of college. So when they graduate and they're no longer on scholarship or no longer student athletes, this is a resource they can use to help them prepare ahead of time for how to be financially wise and financially responsible. So check that out if you're able to. Again, I was completely unaware of it until I was preparing for this unit. So it was something I just sort of came across, but I thought it was a really interesting and innovative way to kind of look at the development of the whole athlete, the holistic view for the athlete, and just are we doing a good job in preparing them to know how to make good decisions with their money and with finances, both in college and as a graduate. Last two pieces here. This is a really neat resource. Again, totally new to me this year in terms of I just sort of came across it and I wanted to make sure I provided it for you. There, within the NCAA website, there's a section that you can, or a tab that you can click on called News. So you'll be able to locate this particular, it'll take you right to this page here for the topic that I mentioned here for you. But the NCAA News tab will actually allow you to have current, up-to-date news briefs and news articles that talk about what's happening now, kind of hot topics, conference calls, committee meetings, anything that's relevant and really, I guess, timely to know. The link that I gave you here, the one that talks about Rutgers failed to monitor its football program, this is actually a media conference call that you're able to click directly to this link and then push play, and you'll hear an audio. I think it's an hour long, and it just covers the entire process that has to do with this specific issue. So this was, I believe, within the football program at Rutgers University. They had some issues with compliance, and so it talks a little bit about that situation and then what the NCAA ultimately decided in terms of infractions and what the consequences were going to be for the Rutgers football program. And again, this was just put online as late as I think last week. So it's very, very current, real-time information that you'll be able to get. And again, it's free, it's easily accessible. And so this link will take you right to this particular article, but you can take a step back out and just click on the news link and it'll show you a list of different things that you can explore. Lastly, this could be an entire unit just developed specifically to talk about the ins and outs of the National Letter of Intent. I really would love to encourage you to click on the link here. I gave you the logo and kind of the website kind of visual image there with their acronym, the NLI, and the National Letter of Intent. On the right-hand side, the very bottom right-hand part of this slide, you can see I put in quotation marks NLI. Please click on that link. It's going to take you directly to the National Letter of Intent website. And again, this could be an entire unit, but I'm just going to throw it out there and introduce it to you. But I would really encourage you to look through this website and to become familiar with it. This is a key part of being a sports administrator and a sport manager, is to be familiar with the National Letter of Intent. One thing that I really appreciated about it, and that I thought, again, was just a really innovative way to share with potential sport managers, coaches at the high school level and the collegiate level, anyone who has a physical touch on the process of National Letter of Intent. I think this is going to be a really incredible resource for them to have. If you link to this site directly from this PowerPoint slide and scroll down, I'd say about midway through, I'm going to count this out for you here. Let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different kind of cartoon video images, and it'll give you about a minute or 2 minutes a piece, and it's going to have a way to watch a cartoon basically unpacking each of these main issues with the NLI. So here's a few of the topics that they consider. 1, can I sign a National Letter of Intent if I'm not receiving an athletic scholarship? That's a common question that athletic directors will receive both at the high school level and at the collegiate level. When can I sign my National Letter of Intent? Can a coach hand deliver it to me? And then does an NLI become null and void? Does it ever happen? For example, student athletes will ask if they are signing their National Letter of Intent with the intention of playing for a particular coach at a particular school, and that coach is either fired or resigns and moves on. Does that athlete's National Letter of Intent still stand? So it'll talk a little bit about that. What happens if I attend a 2-year college after signing a National Letter of Intent? So if you're committing to play in the NCAA, you sign your letter of intent and then you change your mind as a student athlete and you want to play at a junior college level, what happens in that situation? And then also, can I ever be released from my National Letter of Intent? So what are the things that would cause that to happen? And so is that even a possibility if someone is released from their commitment once they sign their National Letter of Intent? So again, it's just a really engaging way that they've done it in terms of a cartoon format, but very, very quick video images and these little cartoon kind of clips, and it really unpacks those real life situations pretty easily. So please take a moment to go through that, and then just look at the website itself in terms of the facts and resources, and save the URL, access it easily on this PowerPoint slide, but also keep this handy because again, at any level that you work at, whether it's the high school level, collegiate level, junior college, or a 4-year institution, this is going to be an important piece that you'll need to know. So a lot of information on this slide, but again, please always email, text, or leave a message on Sakai if you want any further information about any of these links, because they're in addition to what you're going to find in the textbook, but they're all incredibly relevant. And I really did think back of the years that I was a college coach at the NAIA and also the Division I level, and these were probably the biggest pieces that were critical to me to know how to easily access, and also just in terms of the content, to know how to make decisions, how to understand what was happening around me as a collegiate coach. And I can imagine that's even going to be more intense as an athletic director or a sports administrator at any level within the NCAA. So please enjoy all these resources. They are there for you. Thank you so much. Some of the key concepts in our unit on professional sport, Chapter 9, are going to be found in our textbook, but I wanted to pull out 2 pieces in particular to share with you on this PowerPoint slide. Key concepts in labor management relations. Now, to be truthful with you, some of these I knew I had a pretty good context of going in, and then some I actually had to look up and learn a little bit more in depth about it in terms of legally how some of these exemptions and agreements come into play, just the history and the makings of them to start with. And so each of the links here on the left-hand side regarding labor management relations, you can click on any of these 5 options here, and they're going to each take you to a website that has a video component to it. And what I tried to do is make the video component relevant to the topic, as well as making sure that it wasn't too lengthy of a video. I think everything is going to be between 10 and 20 minutes in length. You're welcome to fast forward through it, but each of them will be relevant to pulling out those 5 key pieces in our text in Chapter 9 as they relate to labor management relations. So the first is baseball's antitrust exemption. You can find some more information about that here. This is really, really unique specifically to baseball and only to Major League Baseball. It was an antitrust exemption that began in 1922 and is still in effect today. And then last, I'd say even 10 years, there have been efforts in a legal scope to try to get around this exemption, and it's not going anywhere. So please take a moment just to read a bit more about that. And the video is a fairly old video that I had you linked to, but it does a really good job about giving some background about the exemption. And I think, again, the information is still incredibly relevant for today. The second one is collective bargaining agreement, and I didn't put any text on here about this, but I would like you to read this article. I think it specifically applies to this current year and what we're experiencing with the NFL, and even having President Trump getting involved, a number of owners in the NFL getting involved, and the players' decisions to take a knee during the national anthem. There's a lot of conversation around that issue right now as I'm creating this PowerPoint for you. And what's pretty interesting about the clip that I chose to link this particular topic to, we'll focus a bit about that and just the players' rights and the players' decision to band together and to go ahead and decide what they wanted to do and if they have freedom in order to make those choices. Thirdly is a bit about free agency. And how it impacts player salary, and how it impacts just the shifts that happen in professional sport. So please access that. And the last two here in regards to salary caps and player draft, each of these links will be specific. They'll give an overarching view of what a salary cap is, but then the link will actually take you to an article and a video that will deal specifically with a topic and an issue in soccer. And the player draft will focus primarily on the NFL. And so, again, just to give you just a little bit more focused attention on a particular sport as you're looking through the lens of trying to understand salary caps and player drafts as a whole, I thought it would be helpful to narrow it down and to look at what those issues look like in relation to a specific sport. On the right-hand side, you can see where we talk about key concepts and revenue sources. These are a bit more self-explanatory. There's going to be 4 different issues here that our text will highlight. And again, each link, each word or set of words, if you click on it, it will take you directly to an article online. And so it'll hyperlink you to that particular resource that I'd like to provide for you. The first concept in terms of what's a major revenue source for professional sport is media contracts. Second is gate receipts. Third, licensing and merchandising, and then 4, sponsorships. And I did sort of cut and paste a quick little grid here for you as you're thinking through sort of just the context of key concepts and revenue. This was just taken from 2014, but it gives you a quick snapshot of what makes the most money for the sport market. Is it merchandising, sponsorship, media rights, gate receipts, and kind of how that all ties in together. I will say one of the most interesting things that I've experienced in the last couple of years is both of my parents are retired, and as they are retired from their kind of careers and vocations that they have had their whole life, they love Angels baseball, so they have decided to take part-time retiree jobs through the Major League Baseball Angels Association. And my mom, for a couple years, she was the one who was in charge of, I'm not sure exactly what her title was, but she was in charge of all of the banking and all of the collecting, disseminating, organizing, and turning in all of the funding at the gate. So anyone that took parking, money for parking at Angel Stadium, she was responsible for, at the end of the night, collecting it, counting it, and then being able to process that. And I remember one evening even just asking her, what is the scope of that for an Angel game? What does that actually look like? And it was $250,000 that she processed that evening for parking at Angel Stadium for an Angel game. So just kind of get to give you some context there, but just a really interesting scope in terms of one of the major sources of revenue in professional sport is actually even just the receipts that they get for parking and the money they get for just ticket sales at the gate. So some interesting links there for you. I hope they're helpful. And we'll go ahead and just do one more final slide to unpack a little bit more about professional sport, and then we'll close out this unit. Thank you so much. The last slide here, we're going to keep in the same format as we have in previous unit PowerPoints. This is going to focus on careers in professional sport. So there are two particular components of this. One is going to be considered player personnel positions, and the second is business positions. Now, this will directly relate to your third and final forum discussion for this unit, Unit 5. And similarly, as you did in interscholastic sport and intercollegiate sport, you're going to go ahead and explore just a team that you think you'd really enjoy working with. Maybe for you it's the Dodgers, maybe it's the Jets, maybe it's the Colts, any particular team that you would like to kind of explore current job openings for. It can be in soccer, it can be in golf. Choose any sport and any professional sport, and then any specific team maybe that you're a fan of or you have some connection to. And then go ahead and explore their website and see if you can figure out how do you find careers in professional sport in one of those two categories. Now, I'm going to give you, again, a little insight here. You're going to have to list what those examples of player personnel positions and business positions are within your forum discussion. And I'm going to go ahead and give them to you here, just so you can take note of them here as well if you're listening all the way through to this PowerPoint. Page 233, we'll talk a little bit about player personnel positions. Those will include player personnel itself, medical training and team support, coaching staff, player education and relations. You can also look at community relations if you'd like at that point, video support staff, and then stadium and facility staff. The second area is considered business positions, and those will include jobs within ticket sales, corporate sales, game experience, advertising, promotions, as in giveaways, community relations, media relations, database marketing coordinator, hospitality coordinators, and ticketing. So again, continue to reference our textbook. That's going to be starting, those descriptions are going to be starting on page 233. And it will go ahead and go all the way through to the last option in the business positions for ticketing, which is going to be on page 237. So go ahead and explore those a bit again, and then pick one particular professional sport of your choice, one team within that sport, and then you're going to go ahead and do the forum discussion prompt, which is going to be to explore current live time job opportunities that are open positions that you could apply for if you chose to within those two areas. So that'll do it for us right here for Unit 5. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to the PowerPoint and go through these 7 slides. As always, again, any questions, please feel free to text, email, or message me on Sakai. I'm looking forward to talking with you through this, and then I'm actually very excited and interested to see what you come up with in your forum discussions and the jobs that you find that are available.